let's talk about types of fish tails. So you can tell a lot about the lifestyle and kind of activity of different types of fish based on the structure and size of their tails. To start off, we'll talk about protocercal tail structures. That is seen in mostly embryonic and larval fish before they fully develop, but also seen in some primitive and ancestral fish, such as our friend up here, the hagfish. If you look at the tail of something like a hagfish or a lamprey, you can see that the tail is symmetrical all the way down with equally sized lobes. This structure also somewhat corresponds with the continuous tail configuration, like seen in this guy up here, the estuary cobbler fish, where it is, again, continuous all the way down. Now, tail structure tells us a lot about speed and maneuverability, and with the continuous tail configuration, these fish move very slow, but they are very maneuverable and have a lot of agility. Next, we have the Leptocercal, which is similar to the Protocercal, but slightly modified, as you can see up here in the coelacanth. It's also found in some fish like the lungfish or the chimera fish, but it's basically this up here. It is very wide and then goes and tapers off at a little section right over there. This tail configuration is also similar to the continuous, where it is very slow but pretty maneuverable, but slightly faster and slightly less maneuverable. So you exchange a little bit of maneuverability for a little bit of speed. Next, we have the heterocercal tail configuration, which is seen in fish like sturgeon and most sharks. These guys have asymmetrical tails with a larger upper lobe and a smaller lower lobe. This is especially noticeable in something like the thresher shark, with that very, very long and noticeable upper lobe and the very small lower lobe. The heterocercal tail helps with balance as well as thrust, so it helps them go quite a lot faster and stay balanced instead of wiggling through the water, but largely fish like this have slightly even less maneuverability in exchange for going faster and having more power. Next, we have the Hemi-homocercal, which is a long one. This is seen in fish such as some gar species as well as bowfins. This is kind of an intermediate between heterocercal and homocercal, hence the name Hemi-homocercal, where it's not as asymmetrical as the heterocercal, but not entirely symmetrical either. There is still a difference in the kind of upper and lower lobes. Next, we have the hypocercal, which is kind of the same as heterocercal, but reversed. The upper lobe is quite a lot smaller, and the lower lobe is the larger one, as seen in the flying fish. This is especially useful for things like the flying fish to help generate that upward motion and help them get out of the water and actually perform their flying behavior, because it generates a lot of upward force from that larger lower lobe. Then we have the homocercal, which is seen in a number of teleost or ray-finned fishes, like this one, the tuna. This is when both the upper and lower lobe are symmetrical, and they can also have different configurations within this one. So for example, what the tuna up here has is also called the lunate. Tuna are some of the fastest swimmers in the ocean, and that is due to their lunate tail, which gives them very high speeds for quite a long time. However, they are very, very low maneuverability and don't have much agility. So they have exchanged a lot of that agility and maneuverability for very, very high speeds. Another example of the homocercal, which is different from the lunate, is the forked tail configuration, as seen up here in this Australian herring. This one is very similar to the lunate, however, the tails typically have a lot more surface area, so they can go very fast for very long periods of time, but still do have a good amount of maneuverability due to that increased surface area. But they don't go as fast for as long as those lunate-tailed fishes, so they have less speed but more maneuverability. Similarly, we also have the truncate, which is a type of homocaudal, so the lobes are approximately the same on the top and the bottom. A truncate tail fin ends largely in a vertical straight edge, so it's kind of trapezoid shape. It's seen in some fish like bass, even though you can't see it super well there. And it gives a very balanced intermediate between speed and maneuverability. Fishes with truncate tails can go quite fast for short periods of time and do have decent maneuverability, so it's kind of right smack dab in the middle. Very similar to the truncate is the rounded. It's pretty much the same, but instead of having a straight up and down edge, it has a slightly rounded one as seen in this estuary cod. It has very similar features to the truncate one, where it has intermediate maneuverability and speed. It's just slightly different configuration. Now obviously this isn't a be-all end-all for fishtail categorization. There's definitely a lot of variation within that, such as with the betta fish, and variation can be put down to things like artificial selection in the case of many fancy breeds of bettas, as well as sexual selection, again, largely in the case of betta fish. Different environmental pressures and different sexual selection pressures will result in different looking fish, so this is definitely not a definitive guide to all things fishtail.